Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another story about tricksters. This time, it's Crow again. Tsimshian, the old clever crow, culture hero of the Pacific Northwest. And in this story, we discover why crows today all have crooked noses. Last time we left Crow, he was living inside a big, dead beluga whale washed up on the beach, which he may have had a hand in killing. Check the last story for that one. So Crow is living inside this big dead whale and he's eating all the rotting flesh on the inside. He really likes the stuff around the ribs. That's the really good stuff. If you're ever inside a big dead whale, check that out. Crow is having a whale of a time in there, no pun intended. So he's marching up and down, eating the bits of dead whale inside there, gradually hollowing it out from the inside while it rots on the beach. Then, one day, Tsimshian the crow heard voices. Someone was coming to take his whale meat, he thought. So he pecked a hole in the side of that whale around here and just peeked out with a little beady crow eye. And there, sure enough, he could see, walking down the beach from the north, two Native American warriors, two braves from the nearby village, surely. They had spears in their hands and braided hair down their backs. And as they approached, Tsimshian quickly formulated a plan. He flew up through the whale's blowhole, up into the sky, and then down into the forest behind the beach. There he uttered the magic words and transformed himself into a man, a handsome human man with a lovely moustache and, nice haircut and a earring. And he was a rich man's son, a chief's son. Very, very good looking. And with confidence, he strutted out of that woodland and approached these two warriors, these two strangers. "Hello there," said Tsimshian, very charming. They turned around and they looked startled, frightened. And he said, "You look startled and frightened. What's the matter?" Don't know why he's got an English accent, but he does. These two strangers said, We've just discovered this big whale and seen something strange. A dark shape flew out of the whale's blowhole." And Tsimshian said, "That's a bad sign, my friends. You'd better not eat any of the meat." The two warriors said, "You speak wisely, stranger. You better come back to our village." And Tsimshian agreed. And before long, he was sat at the right-hand side of the chief of the village, and he was telling jokes, and everyone was warming to him. And even then, a story was formulating in his mind. And eventually, the question came round to, where did you come from? These two guys, they just found you in the middle of nowhere, and you're all dressed in this finery, but there's no village for miles. Tell us, what's your story? And Tsimshian said, "Well, thing is, I was the son of a chief, a great chief from a village a little way down the coast, quite a way. And one day when I was out hunting, a big whale washed up on the beach. And the people, they started to eat the whale. And when I came back, I said, no, don't eat the whale. But it was too late. They had all eaten some. And everyone, the whole village, my father, my mother, my sister, my brothers, everyone died. And I'm the only one left. And a little crow tear just dripped down Tsimshian's face. And everyone took pity on Tsimshian. And one thing led to another, and he stayed there in the village. "Stay with us," they said, "seeing as you have no family." And eventually Chulien married the chief's daughter, and he was having a very nice time. And, everyone liked Chulien. He was so handsome, and he was charming, and he was funny. He could, really tell a good story. And because they liked him so much, and because he was the chief's son-in-law, they kind of let him get away with stuff. He would sleep in a little bit longer than anyone else was kind of allowed to. And even though he would sometimes do stuff that was kind of annoying, like he would interrupt people a lot, and he would say, oh, I've got a better story than that. And he would do other stuff, like he would walk into your hut still wearing his shoes. He wouldn't take his moccasins off. The reason for that, my friends, is because Crow's feet were still crow's feet. So he had to keep his slippers on the whole time, or he would be discovered. So Crow would sleep in every day, which suited him just fine because, every night Chulien would turn back into a crow and fly back to that dead whale through the blowhole back into the pit of its stomach, and he would eat as much as he could, and then fly back bloated before dawn, turn back into a handsome chief's son, and no one would be any the wiser. But one day, it was just a bit too much. Crow had just been sleeping in a bit too long, and the other villagers were trying to wake him up. And they pulled back his duvet, and they could see his moustache was caked in whale grease. And they said, "It's you. You've been eating the dead whale." And he said, "No, I haven't. No one would eat that dead whale." And they pulled its blankets off him, and they saw his feet. His feet were crow's feet, and they said, "It's you. You're Chulien. You're the crow." And Chulien said, and he turned back into a crow and tried to fly out through the smoke hole, but they grabbed him by his horrible little feet, dragged him back to the ground, and stomped on him till he was dead. And then, with no ceremony whatsoever, because they'd heard of Chulien's tricks, they chucked him out the back of the village on a garbage heap. And there he remained, limp, broken, and very, very dead. Sometime later, an old woman wandered along. She picked up Chulien's lifeless body in her hand and took out a knife from her pocket and chopped off his beak, chopped his face off, and put that beak in her sewing box because she thought it would make a very good needle or awl. Chulien lay there dead, noseless, on the garbage heap for a while longer, and then some magpies started flying around. Now, according to legend, Crow is Magpie's uncle. But these magpies, they didn't have a lot of respect for their uncle because they were flying all over the garbage heap, making a hell of a racket, and they were shitting all over the place, all over the garbage heap, all over Chulien, and they were making such a racket that Chulien sprang back to life and said, "Oi! I'm trying to be dead!" And the magpie said, "What are you doing here, uncle?" And he said, I'm sleeping. Now get lost." And the magpies went, and flew away. And Chulien was angry now. He had his face cut off. He had been shat on by his nephews. He had been woken up. He had a headache. And he'd been betrayed by the villagers. And he was going to get his nose back, no matter what it took. So Chulien flew back to the beach, making sure he wasn't seen. And he turned himself back into a human. And then with his finger, he drew in the sand the shape of some boats. And in the boats, he drew figures, warriors, human warriors with spears and shields. And those figures sprung to life when Chulien spoke the magic words. And he said, "Boys, on my signal, you're going to row around that point there and you're going to attack the village, okay? On my signal." And then he flew away to the point and he gave the signal, and they were rowing round there. And then he flew back into the camp and turned back into a human. And then he started making a great panic and said, I've seen them on the point. Attackers, invaders are coming, everyone run, save yourselves. And a few people started to panic and run out of there. Someone said, hey, don't I recognize you? He had his hand over his nose, you see, because he had no nose. And someone said, why is your hand in front of your nose? And he said, because I've got a cold. And someone went, oh my God, I recognize you. You're supposed to be. But at that moment, drums and warriors were pouring up the beach and attacking the village. Arrows and spears going here and there. And the villagers were running. And Julien said, run, run, leave everything, especially your sewing boxes. So the villagers abandoned everything. And Julien turned himself back into a crow and started picking through all the discarded possessions, and then eventually he found that old woman's sewing box, opened it up, and there was his nose, and he was just fixing it back onto his face. The warriors, meanwhile, had turned back into sand, and the villagers had their senses had kind of returned. Who was that person telling us to flee? It looked like the chief's son-in-law, but he's supposed to be dead. But he's Julien the Crow. He's a shapeshifter. We've been tricked. And just as they were pouring back into the village, Julien was fixing his nose back on, and he realised he was rumbled, and he didn't have time to get it on straight. So he flew out of that village with his nose still wonky. And that's why crows have crooked noses to this day. It was all because of Julien. And that time, he died and rose again. So, my friends, another trickster story and another story about Crow, the culture hero of the Pacific Northwest. A lot of parallels with Anansi there, that spider of the Ashanti people of West Africa. Very similar vibes, all these tricksters. Often foolish, often cunning, always greedy, often destructive, but sometimes creative too. Anansi, remember, stole all the stories from Nyame, the sky god, and Crow, or Raven in this story, did one time make good. He stole the sun and the moon and the stars and brought them to this world. So perhaps I'll tell that story on this channel for the next installment of Trickster Makes This World. Thank you very much, my friends. I'll see you next time.
Sha